So triceps, whatever. Obviously, you got the larger back of the arm here muscle here, okay? Why are they called triceps? So they're called triceps because there's 3 heads on the tricep, okay? You have essentially the lateral head, which is the outside. You have the inner head, which is like when you do a double bicep, you see that right here. And then you have the long head, which is in the middle of the triceps, okay? And by the way, we're also going to be posting infographics on this today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. So everything I talk about, you'll get an infographic on. So tricep 3 muscles, that's the first lesson. Second lesson that you want to know is that the triceps themselves have an origin and they have an insertion that will determine what their action is. So that basically the outer head and the inner head of the triceps are going to essentially insert on the lateral and the medial part of the upper arm, which we call the humerus, okay? Whereas the long head, that middle part of the triceps, that's going to insert essentially on the scapula, okay? Or kind of the shoulder blade. So what does that mean? 2 of the heads are on the arm themselves. One of them crosses the shoulder joint. So that means 2 of the heads are going to work just on the arm and around the forearm area, and then one of the heads is going to actually act at the shoulder joint as well. So all of them insert right here where your elbow is, and that's called the olecranon process. Okay? So I feel like I show them this stuff. So anyway, you guys get my point, right? So if we're talking about that, you need to understand that again. The outer head of the triceps and the inner head basically originate up here on the upper arm and the inner arm. The long head originates on the scapula. All of them insert on the elbow or the olecranon process. So what does that mean, right? Okay, anatomy, blah, blah, what does that mean? Well, all of them serve to extend the elbow, okay? So if I'm above here and I'm moving my elbows upward, that's extension of the arms, okay? That's essentially, these are extensors, okay? Elbow extensors, that's extension. That's going to be, all 3 of the heads are going to work to extend it, okay? So, but the long head is going to do shoulder extension. So that means I'm moving my arm backward, right? So if I move my arm backward, that's going to be shoulder extension. So if I have my arm here, if I bring it back, that's shoulder extension. That's the long head. But again, that's the middle. So I want you to think about this like this. Again, think about this like this. All of them are going to serve as extensors. So what would that be if I'm doing tricep cable press downs? That's an extension movement. If I'm doing a bench press, technically if I'm doing a bench press, I'm extending the elbow, okay? But if I'm doing, so that's going to work the outer head, it's going to work the inner head, it's also going to work the long head. However, if I want inner thickness, like here, that's going to be determined in large part by positioning, okay? So basically, if I do straight arm pull downs, I'm going to hit the long head of the triceps. If I do dumbbell pullovers like this, so I'm laying back on a bench and I'm doing dumbbell pullovers, or if I'm doing straight arm cable pull downs, you might get sore in the middle of the tricep. That's the long head, right? So that's the point. So again, kind of to summarize that up, all 3 of the triceps are going to be extension. The long head is going to extend the shoulder. So that's going to be tricep pull downs. That's going to be dumbbell pullovers for that inner tricep thickness. But also if I put the triceps on stretch, that's going to also affect this long head more, this inner thickness more. So let me give you an example of like how I would target the long head. Say I'm doing one of my favorite exercises, skull crunchers here, okay? So I'm doing skull crunchers. If I were to do them to where I'm putting my arms back on stretch, I'm laying back on the bench and extending this way, okay, but actually laying down a bench, it puts the long head on stretch and causes more damage in that muscle, okay? If I were to take a dumbbell and I were to take my arms above my head and do a French press, it's putting the long head, this inner thickness, on stretch, and it's going to cause more damage in the long head. If, on the other hand, I'm standing up and I'm doing cable extensions down here, there's less stretch on the long head, and so I might get more damage here and here as opposed to as much here. So if you're talking about inner tricep thickness, that's going to be more like French presses up here. That's going to be overhead cable extensions here. But if I'm really trying to just cause less damage in that thickness, not as much growth, it's going to be more tricep press downs here. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? And Matt actually says that's why explains why his triceps are so sore on pull day. It's absolutely right. So now let's move on to the next topic. So the next topic really is what is the muscle fiber makeup of the triceps, right? Because a lot of people want to know that. Everyone wants thick triceps. You know, it works out side tricep pose, double bicep pose, how your delts look, you know, like how they tie into the triceps, how your arms fill out a shirt. You know, all these are very important things from an aesthetic standpoint. So, but also if you're just like, if you're interested in being strong, like Paul over here, actually Andy's got a killer bench. He's lifting some heavy weights. Andy's got a killer bench. I've seen him take down some big guys in the gym. But triceps are going to be important for that too, right? So the muscle fiber makeup of the triceps is actually about 65% fast and about 35% slow. So 65% fast and 35% slow, okay? So what does that mean? It means that the distribution of your workouts, if you want thick, full, massive triceps, probably 2 out of 3 workouts you're going to focus in a repetition range that's anywhere from like, you know, you could go as low as 3 reps to as high as 10 reps, okay? So it's going to be relatively heavy. So anywhere from 3 to 10 reps. I mean, I really don't do a lot of 3-rep workouts, but you know, if you're a power lifter, that's cool. But I would say probably if you're bodybuilding, 5 to 10 repetition range. And how do you make a weight heavier? What you can do is rest longer. So you're talking about like 3-minute rest between sets, heavier type of lifting, compound type of movements. Another way that you might target the triceps, because they're like 2 out of 3 workouts because they're fast, is, and Andy pointed out this to me the other day, is more explosive type movements. So there's a concept, it's called like maximal intended velocity. And basically, like, a lot of people are like, oh, how fast should I lift a weight? Well, with triceps, you want to lift as fast as the weight will allow you to lift in a controlled fashion. So if I'm doing close grip bench and I'm doing a weight I can only hit 5 reps with, by the time I'm down to the last 2 reps, I don't care how fast I try and push it, it's not going to move very fast. So let the weight dictate the speed, and I think that's kind of the point. So kind of, we call that maximally intended velocity. Or explosive type movements are gonna work the triceps. You know, some people like plyo type movements. That would work the triceps as well. Now, but don't neglect that one workout where you're going 12 to 15 reps, high metabolic stress. You're not resting as much, where it's 30 to 60 seconds rest. That's going to target all the fast twitch fibers. Excuse me, slow twitch muscle fibers. Because again, a lot of times you're going to plateau eventually on how much you can grow on your fast twitch fibers. You need to then target, especially those slow twitch fibers. You're going to target that with, again, 12, 15 reps and things like that nature, okay? So again, 2 out of 3 workouts, relatively heavy. Maybe one is a very heavy workout, like if you have a heavy bench day, maybe you're doing sets of 5 on close grip bench. On your next day where it's kind of moderately heavy, maybe you're doing sets of 10, but longer rest, 2 to 3 minutes. And then one day, high metabolic stress day where it's like 12 to 15 reps, short rest, 30 to 60 seconds, etc., etc. That's how you target from a repetition range. Now, one thing we're going to get into now is basically, remember I said you had 3 heads. Now, is it that simplistic? Do all the heads respond the same way? And I'm going to get a little advanced with you guys right now. And I'm going to talk about how different exercises, because basically if you're going to target fast twitch muscle fibers, another way to target them is through percentage of your 1 repetition maximum. So say, for example, you could close grip bench 135 pounds, or let's just say, let's make it round number. Say you can close grip bench 200 pounds for 1 rep. 80% of that's going to be 160 pounds. But let's say that you can do tricep cable extensions with in your 1RMs like, 100 pounds. 80% of that's going to be 80 pounds, okay? So the main thing studies show is that I can lift at a higher repetition range at a higher percentage of my 1RM on like tricep extensions, cable extensions, which are isolation, compared to compound movements like close grip bench. So what's the point of this? Well, as you get advanced, there are different things you're really looking for, you know what I mean? You might feel that like you have good inner tricep thickness, but like on the side, you can't get that nice look that ties into your shoulder. So you're trying to hit this outer head. Or maybe you don't have, maybe you have good biceps, but you have weak triceps here. That's the inner, that's the inner part of the triceps, okay? What I'm gonna tell you is that you can target the different heads of the triceps based on their fatigability. So studies show that the long head of the triceps is not very fatigue resistant. So you can wear it out in like very rapidly, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. The outer head here is more fatigue resistant, which means that it takes longer to break down, maybe like 50 to 60 seconds to really fatigue all out if you're going maximal. Whereas like the inner head is very fatigue resistant. Now, tying that all together, remember that basically if you're trying to lift heavy, when you're doing tricep cable extensions, I can do higher repetitions, 12 repetitions maybe at 80% of my 1RM. Where if I'm doing like close grip bench, I may only get 5 to 6. So what does that mean? If you're gonna target more of the long head, more compound movements actually maybe they're gonna fatigue your triceps out faster, and so they might target more of like that long head which fatigues out faster. If I'm trying to get like this inner head here, I'm gonna need higher repetitions, and so selecting out more cable extensions is gonna be better. Whereas this outer head responds, is kind of in the middle. Heavy weights and then longer fatigue resistant exercises will actually target that similarly. So basically the point is that for more of like the long head, do compound movements, like again, like close grip bench. But if you're trying to really fatigue out the outer and inner heads, more of the isolation movements are gonna be good. Last thing that we're actually talking about in our topic today is going to be basically like how you should how you position your hands on the bar and where you position the bench impact your triceps activation. And the answer to that is yes. So basically, if I'm doing bench press here, so there's different grips. So here I can have a thumb grip, I can have a shoulder width grip, which is moderate, or I can have a very long grip. Studies show that going out wide to shoulder width to thumbs touching, I get more activation. So you're gonna get more activation with a close grip bench, keeping your elbows tucked in on triceps than I would going shoulder width apart or wider. So the main take-home message on that is, yes, you're gonna wanna basically do more close grip bench work. The last thing that we're gonna present in our infographics is bench angle. Basically, you get the least amount of tricep activity on like an incline bench, and as you go down on flat to decline, you get the greatest activation in your triceps. So that's really important to understand there. So, so basically, let's sum this all up. Triceps, essentially, all of them are extensors of the elbow. What's the elbow extensor? Here's my elbow. Here, I'm extending the forearm. Okay. The triceps themselves, the outer head and the inner head insert on the arm, which means they're going to be purely elbow extensors. The long head, or that middle thickness, crosses the shoulder joint. So not only is it an extensor, it's going to extend the shoulder. So if you want to work it, you need to put that long head on stretch. That's going to be things like French presses, overhead cable extensions. It's going to be things like cable pull downs. It's going to be things like dumbbell pullovers. Okay. If you're trying to, overall the triceps are primarily about 65% fast twitch, 35% slow twitch. So it means that about 2 out of 3 workouts, you're gonna wanna work anywhere from a 5 to 10 repetition range, and longer rest periods like 2 to 3 minutes, compound movements. But one time you're gonna really have a lot more isolation exercise. That's gonna be for a slow twitch. You're gonna train in 12 to 15 repetition range, and you're gonna have like 30, 60 seconds rest. The other thing to understand is that the triceps, if you're really trying to get advanced, you're like, inner tricep thickness. That's more going to, the inner triceps or the long head fatigues out faster. So basically heavier reps is going to target that more, or exercises that where you fatigue out faster. Close grip bench, you fatigue out faster than tricep extension. So close grip bench and compound movements might even be better, for example, for that inner thigh tricep thickness. Whereas inner tricep thickness, you're going to do more of those higher repetition things like cable extensions. Whereas the outer head's probably going to be a combination of both. Lastly, we talked about arm positioning. Close grip is going to give you the greatest activation, then moderate second most, and then wide the least amount. So guys, that is the lessons that we're going to be putting up this week. Again, I'm going to California, so I'm be keeping you guys posted. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is do Q&As.
Question 1.
Question 1.
Combined interset stretching with BFR. I've had with the best results I've had from any intensity technique. What are your thoughts on both or either?
Interset stretching with BFR. The concept on BFR, blood flow restriction, has caused a huge pump and a lot of metabolic stress, right? The thing about interset stretching is it stretches when you have a lot of blood in the muscle. Interset stretching seems to cause more mechanical trauma and may lead to more muscle growth. So once the combination of blood flow restriction and interset stretching, one, it may be safer because you're not lifting as much load. Two, it may be more effective because you have a greater pump. So I love that question. Great question.
If the triceps are approximately 67% fast twitch, do you recommend training them with heavy weight? We discussed this. Would you?
Well, Ryan asked a good question too. He goes, why not just do lower reps and higher reps in the same workout?
Like a DUP?
You know, Ryan asked a really good question. You know, Ryan Oman, traditionally you break workouts up so you have heavy days and you have more higher rep days. However, I'm glad you bring this up, and this is why I love you guys and why you ask your questions. There's only been one study that's really looked at what if you combined all of them in one, and that's sort of a hybrid group. In fact, John Georges in our lab did a pilot study 2 years ago on this and we presented it at NSCA National Strength Conditioning Conference and published it there. And actually, you might be right. It's a good point. You could train them all in the same workout. And actually, I was just talking to Ryan Lowry before this. We were having a meeting, and he made a good point where you could actually do giant sets where you start off heavy and then you progress to a burnout. Another thing you do is you could have heavy workouts, and then you could progress basically and do a burnout to hit the slow twitch fiber. So I think, Ryan, both of those techniques are certainly acceptable. You know, so I'm not opposed to either way.
Best muscle group to train with triceps?
Great question. Typically, pressing movements target the triceps very well, so you're going to fatigue the triceps out when you're hitting chest or shoulders. So you can finish the triceps after that with more of tricep, isolation type work. However, remember what I said. When you train back, especially if you're doing a lot of dumbbell pullovers and straight arm pull downs, you fatigue the long head. So if you're really looking for inner tricep thickness, technically, if you did a lot of pullovers that workout, you could technically train the triceps with the back as well.
How often should you hit a muscle? For instance, with tricep, how often do you recommend training a tricep throughout the week and or off days?
Great question. So it's going to, how often you train triceps is going to depend on how much muscle damage that you actually get. Do you see Arella's question? Remind me of his when we come back. So basically, if you're doing a metabolic workout like 12 to 15 reps, you may be able to train the next day. If you do more of a heavy lifting one, you may need 48 hours recovery, right? So it all depends on what you do. The other thing is that if you put the triceps on stretch, so if I do this, if I do dumbbell pullovers or I'm doing French presses, there's a lot of stretch on the triceps, especially the long head. That's going to cause more damage. I'll need more 48 to 72 hours. If, on the other hand, I'm doing more metabolic, if I stand up right now, okay? If I'm doing tricep extensions, okay? If I allow the weight to come in tight to me and I stretch my elbow, there's more stretch on the medial and lateral head. That's going to cause more damage. If I step out here, where my triceps are here, there's less stretch on them. I'm going to have less damage, meaning I can technically do that almost every single day. So damage is going to determine how much you can actually perform. So I would switch things up and essentially do, you know, maybe if you're prioritizing triceps, I hit them like four, maybe 5 days a week, and just increase the frequency. So if you're doing 2 heavy workouts, the other one's going to be more metabolic. So increase the frequency with more metabolic type training, because you can't really do it with the heavy lifts because of the damage. Someone asked about insertions or something?
Yeah, what would give us deeper muscle insertions? I've been using BPAC cell expansion protocols with nice volume results, but I'd like deeper cuts.
So one thing is that, like, when we talk about insertions, you're really talking where the triceps like insert. They insert here on the olecranon process. Unfortunately, we can't change that except through surgery, and I don't recommend changing that. You know, at least I don't. I don't recommend that. But what I will say is this. What you can do, and I do believe in this, that you can make the triceps fuller near the insertion point. Well, even though they're here, you can't necessarily extend it, but you can make it look fuller. So how do you do that? Well, basically, if you look at muscle fibers, okay? Imagine, when you look at a muscle fiber, it almost looks like this. See the digits of my fingers? Okay, muscle fiber is long, and it's composed of these little units that are called sarcomeres, okay? So sarcomeres can basically, I can add them this way, and this way, and this way. That means the triceps getting thicker, right? So that's more, basically hypertrophy to make it thicker, okay? But I can also do this. So basically, say I have these 3 digits, I can add sarcomeres in series. Like, I can lengthen sort of the chain. I can't change the insertion, but I can sort of lengthen the chain. So if I can do that, if I can lengthen it this way, that will make, I firmly believe that'll make the triceps look fuller near the insertion points. These are things that I think about a lot, you know. Most scientists really don't care about this stuff, but I think it's very important. So, but here's the thing to understand. How do you do that? The way that you increase sarcomeres is you have to put them on stretch. Eccentric contractions, as well as training in a lengthened mode, is going to cause the most sarcomere damage. So skull crunchers put the triceps heavily on stretch. Anything where you feel a stretching sensation is going to increase sarcomeres. Intraset stretching. If I go here and I'm doing tricep extensions and then I stretch the triceps as much as possible, that's going to lengthen the sarcomeres and make them fuller around this region. So basically, and this is very careful, but if I have my partner, if I lift a weight I can't normally lift and I go down, I have my partner help me lift it down, I should be able to control it on the way up. That's assisted eccentric loading. That's going to make the triceps fuller around the extension. So I hope that helps, guys. You're welcome, Ryan. Ryan goes, what are you describing with the Giants SS DUP is pretty much what I do for nearly every muscle group. Besides a metabolic response, the better the pump is always a plus. Yeah, I agree with you. There was another question we had earlier that was on Instagram that Paul brought up to me. Essentially, what happens when you change your wrist angle? Does that actually make an impact? It's a real good question, and basically the answer to your question is that the triceps are going to insert here, and they're going to originate either on the arm or back here. They have no insertion here, right? So basically, moving your wrist is not going to necessarily affect the triceps. It might affect your grip, which is going to not allow you to use more weight. Like, for example, if I do a reverse grip extension, like on cables, I can't lift as much, but that's not necessarily limited from my triceps, if that makes sense. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Best angle while doing dips to stimulate triceps versus chest and shoulders.
That's a really good question. Two points I would give you on this is this. Number one, if you look at typically a triceps bar, oftentimes they start in narrow and then they extend out wide, okay? So you're gonna wanna be more on the narrow end of that tricep bar, because closer in is gonna activate the triceps more than wider out. That's the first thing I would say, okay? The second thing I'm gonna say is that the more you lean forward, the more chest you're gonna activate. The more vertical you are, the more you take your chest out and activate the triceps. That's the second thing I'm gonna say. The third piece of advice that I'm gonna give you is how you focus. If studies show that if I do dips and I focus on my chest, I get more chest activation. If I focus on my triceps, I get more tricep activation. So, so that's kind of the point. Nick asked, did you just infer that reverse grip tricep extensions would be useless because of the insertion points on the elbow rather than the wrist? They're not going to be that beneficial, no.
How often should you do BFR training, and how tight should the straps be?
BFR training 2 to 3 days a week is going to be good. Typically, when you wrap around your elbows, we published a study in JSCR a long time ago. Excuse me, shoulder. You're going to want basically to wrap at around a 6 to 7 perceived pressure as you wrap around. Will an injury to the long head of the triceps lead to shoulder pain? It could. You know, it crosses the shoulder joint. Manoli Bergen says, but the biceps don't. I'm assuming you're talking about affected by the wrist. The biceps are heavily affected by the wrist because they're supinators. Okay. So, any other questions?
When performing an extension, what is or if there are any benefits to the contraction at the bottom of the motion? So actually holding the contraction as opposed to performing.
Good question. The main thing that you're going to get when we call that peak contraction training, some people call it static training. The main benefit I see I always remember when I first started like training and stuff like that, and I would contract as hard as I could on the bottom because I was like trying to etch out the cuts in my arms and like burn in the cuts. But the biggest thing I would say you get is, number one, I think you do develop a mind-muscle connection by contracting hard in the bottom. And skill is important to building the triceps. So basically, that's number one, I would say, is that you can build a better mind-muscle connection. And in fact, we should probably show that. We could literally demonstrate that live. When you're looking on, that's one. Two, there is research that shows that near the top of the motion, you get the most activation of the triceps. So technically we're in the top, and actually you could see this in our lab. You do get a massive contraction, massive activation of muscle fibers on that peak contraction. Finally, when you're contracting maximally, you kind of occlude the blood vessels around that area, which could build up more metabolic stress and kind of cause a blood flow restriction effect. So I do think that's important. Ben says, if you use less grip when you rotate the wrists and skull crunchers, wouldn't that make triceps work more? Well, the problem is triceps are fast twitch. It's a good question, Ben, but they're dependent heavily on load. So if you lower the load, you will likely see less activity.